cried the sparrow.
You're listening to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we sit down with everyday people who do extraordinary things. I'm your host, Jerome Rand.
Good morning, everybody. Wow. Coming to you from JeromesTown, my town, downtown. It feels good. I've got some Taster's Choice Nescaf this morning. Let's just see how that is. Ooh, super strong. Love that. Need the jolt. My body is so sore. It took a lot to get JeromesTown back up into shape, and we'll talk a little update on that. And then I've got a few inquiries I have to get to. One about anchoring, and the other one about the Gulf of Maine and soloing across it. Kind of how to get from point A to point B. All that traffic up there, the lobster boats, fishing boats, scallop boats, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, we made it. Finally, we made it. We had a fantastic time out in the Chesapeake. Hopefully you all enjoyed the Rutherford Files. That was so much fun, and it was pretty funny. My old man, he listens to Rutherford's show all the time, and was commenting. He said, you know, he's different when he's on your show. He like laughs a lot, and he's more upbeat. I was like, well, you know, I kind of bring that out of people, or at least I try to. Positivity, you know, it goes a long way. But it was a lot of fun. It was great to see him, and hopefully all goes well with his setup and getting underway. Those times, man, you know, as the clock starts ticking down and you've got this vessel and you've got all these lists and all this stuff that you've got to do, you may think, oh man, you know, I got 3 weeks before we have to leave. That time goes by so fast. It's absolutely crazy. And I don't know, after you've done and plotted and planned for a few of these big voyages, you really do realize how much time and effort it takes to make sure that you've got all of it. You're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. Oh, that coffee's good. It was cold. First night I stayed out here. I think this was my second night in JeromesTown, but the first night I had a big old fire because we had the apocalyptic ice storm up here, storm of the century, some call it, up here in northern Michigan, where the tree damage is... It's kind of otherworldly. As I drove up here, I didn't see any of it until it was a very sort of small area that got hit so hard. But essentially, they just got a massive amount of ice buildup on all these trees, and it roasted these forests. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Over the next couple of days, the leaves should be popping. They're just starting to get past the budding phase, but like literally, there's just branches and trees all over on the sides of the roads, and they've had weeks to clean up. That's just how massive scale this thing was. Whole forests, pine forests and stuff like that, completely dead, branchless and stripped of their bark. My parents were up here, and they were telling me that the first night when the trees started falling down, it was really eerie because there wasn't any wind. It was just from the overall weight of this ice. And so the huge branches, you know, the size of regular trees, are falling in the forest around the property. And it's like, holy cow. Luckily, JeromesTown survived, and we've got enough firewood to have some serious fires this summer. Should be a lot of fun. Hopefully we get a little bit of time. I'm going to be up here for a month, and then got to get on up to Lake Superior for the next thing, and then down to Chicago to prep for the Chicago to Mac race. Joseph, I am coming for you, brother. Hopefully they're going to launch the boat soon. I don't know if they did it yesterday or not, but I think the weather was a bit snotty down there. And cold and all that to get from the boatyard over to the marina, but we'll check in. I'm still doing these have to do the sea survival course online, and this is stuff that I'm pretty familiar with. I've done a few of those in my day, but I did them over in England and Australia and stuff, and even some in the British Virgin Islands. And it's all pretty much the same material, but every country has their own little tweak, and you got to answer all these little quizzes. So I'm kind of going through it, but it's 15 different things. It takes like a total of 8 hours, I think, something like that. But I don't know. Working my way through, getting her done, and then I'll have a little certificate in the end, which would be good. It's part of the qualifying things you need to do the race here on Lake Michigan. But yeah, we're going to be yanking some boats out of the old garage coming up here soon. And then also working on some other boats for the club up here and get a bunch of their ensigns put in the water. I love that Pearson ensign. It's no Pearson 323, like Rutherford always says, but it's one of the greatest small day sail keel boats I think I've ever had the privilege of sailing. They're so comfortable. You can fit like 8 adults in them, and nice teak benches. They sail real well, and they're just, I don't know, they're fun, traditional sloop design, and just an absolute blast. They last forever, and yeah, I'm looking forward to cleaning our hull up, dropping her in the water, stepping the mast. We used one of those gin poles for the mast. And it's pretty cool because you got to raise it. It's not deck stepped boat. It's actually keel stepped. And I don't know. The mast is a little too heavy to just try and hoink it up there like a Flying Scot or something like that. So got to use the old brain power instead of the brawn power. But yeah, it just feels good. Although I am sore. Oh my goodness! Like, when you're on a boat for a while, and really we were San Diego, Bermuda, Florida, in between Florida and Bermuda, and then up on the Chesapeake and on Sparrow in there as well. And as much physicality is involved with some sailing in certain times, it really, most of the time you're just sitting and, book in your hand or something. And yeah, I got up here, and in JeromesTown, one of the issues is the platforms are kind of always in need of a new skin. It kind of gets rotted away and all that sort of stuff. But this time we had all of this distressed old cedar, like inch-thick planks. And so I threw those down, and now we are juicing, man. But it was there's probably, I don't know, 20, 30 planks on each one. Screw them all down, bending over. My back is like, rah, what are you doing? And then you go and you set up JeromesTown, and everything is pretty much stored in these big plastic tubs, but it's just a lot of like lifting and moving, and it takes all day. It's like a 10-12 hour operation. Then you got to get the wood chips, then you spread those, and by the end of it I was just like, wow, I'm feeling my age a little bit, unfortunately. Plus, you go for a run or whatever and all that sort of stuff. And then the next day we're doing all this work staining this giant pergola thing. And we were thinking it'd take a couple hours. It ended up taking like 7.5, maybe 8 hours to do. But it was super fun hanging out with an old friend of mine the whole time and regaling each other with stories of our youth. Oh, so much fun. And but it was all like overhead work, so I'm basically staring up and I'm reaching up, painting and staining all day for hours and hours, which was good, but I'm also definitely feeling it in my shoulders and my back and my neck. Oh, I need a new body. Oh, but what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and I know that if I keep the momentum going, and break into a nice little workout or something today and just kind of keep pushing, then eventually I will become stronger, and this sort of effort will become easier. It's just pushing through the rough bit right now. There's always this transformation when you go from a boat to back on land and you're doing kind of manual labor work. I can always remember, like when I was a plumber, I was pretty much doing the real painful stuff was always doing the underground, digging the ditches for all the PVC pipe that all had to be that perfect grade, and you just, when I knew we were starting one of those off, the last one I did was for like a McDonald's or something. And, you're in there and you're just digging and you're going to be digging for days. And then you're going to be laying these pipes and then you're going to be burying. And then you're going to be compressing. And it's just, those first couple days hurt so bad. The next day, your hands, everything, your back. And then, I don't know, like day 3, 4, all of a sudden it doesn't hurt so much anymore. And then if you skip right to another job where you're doing just about the same thing, then it's no big deal at all. So it always amazes me how quickly our bodies can kind of adapt and react to us pushing them in a certain direction or asking a certain amount of effort out of it. As long as you don't hurt yourself, it's pretty cool. You feel that sore, but it's a good sore. And then as long as it's muscle sore, not like back and joints. I don't know. It's awesome. I'm feeling it right now, though. That is for sure. So I wanted to get into, I received an email a while back, and I meant to chime in on this, but essentially what they were asking about was, and I'm trying to find it, but it might be a little too far down the line. Let's see, where are we? Essentially, well, it's all about anchoring and kind of choosing an anchorage and all that sort of stuff. Because it can be, you go down to a place like the Caribbean, Bahamas, and you rock up to some little cove and a nice protected little area that's going to keep you in the lee of the island and all that sort of stuff, so that as the winds and everything start to build up and the waves, you don't get bounced around, you get protected by it. But then lo and behold, you rock up in there and there are, here we go. So this is from Rob. How do you handle anchoring in crowded anchorages in the Caribbean, say in the high season? I imagine pulling in and seeing hundreds of masts and feeling overwhelmed. Yes, I mean it is, because you don't want to, obviously. Best case scenario is you're going to be able to, you find a busy anchorage, you're going to be able to find your own little spot kind of off on the edge. That's what I'm always going for. I like to anchor in shallower water, and as far away from people, or at least just, happily distanced from people. Just because if something happens and you got to pull your anchor up or a big squall rolls in, that's kind of the big fear, is that all of a sudden you're in a situation where now the wind's blowing 40 knots, it's raining, and there's boats dragging their anchors at you, and it's chaos. I mean, it ends up being fun because everybody's hopping in their dinghies and everybody's trying to help each other, because that's the one big thing, as much as finding a busy anchorage and it's all packed and there's people everywhere is kind of annoying. At the same time, it can be a bit of a safety net, because everybody's kind of out there just trying to help make sure their boats are okay, your boat's okay, and when Mother Nature throws a little curveball at you, it's like sailors come together and we try and help each other out. But ideally, the worst thing I think you can do is just try and join the herd right in the middle. Because that's where, you got to imagine, you got all these different anchors down there. People are putting all sorts of different scope and everything. And it becomes sort of chaotic. And it's so easy to tangle up. Because, when you go and anchor, like if you're in a busy spot, you're gonna pull up pretty darn close to the next boat. Put your anchor down, because you're trying to essentially make it so that when you leave, you don't have to worry about kind of having another boat over the top of where your anchor is. I mean, if you do, it's all about communication and talking to the people and saying, hey, you know, we're going to be pulling out. I think our anchor's underneath your boat now because you put out more scope, or I anchored too close, and all that sort of stuff. Long and short of it is, ideally you can sort of stay out on the outskirts, to try and say like, well, usually people are anchoring towards the end of the day, so you can try and get there earlier. Sometimes that can be sort of a bit of a top tip, but you don't want to sit there and spend your beautiful sailing day at anchor because, you know, you wanted to get the prime spot. And in reality, what's probably going to happen then is you might come in early, anchor, and you got this great spot, but then people are going to start anchoring around you. There's a herd mentality that comes into it. But it is, it's one of those where like I said, if I can, I like to be anchored in about 10 to 15 feet of water. That way I don't have to put out too much scope. That way it's also super easy for me to dive the anchor and make sure it's exactly lying how I want. But yeah, I will typically try and pick far off regions of any anchorage, try and get onto the outskirts, maybe where it's a little less desirable as far as how protected you are. But I don't want to be surrounded by people. I don't want them all that close just because the winds get shifty, boats start swirling, scope, all these issues can kind of come out. And if you're down below sleeping, the last thing you want is to be woke, have the sound of a boat rubbing up against your boat waking you up. So my top tips for that are essentially, if you're rocking up and you see a super crowded, busy anchorage and there's really just no wiggle room on the outskirts, then move on. Go try and find another one. And that, if you're sailing in a place or around an area like, let's say, the Bahamas or something, try and have a couple have a plan B and a plan C. So as you rock up to one, you might be like, oh man, this place is there's no room at all in here. Well, then go ahead and be like, okay, the next one is like 30 or 45 minutes, but leave yourself room because you don't want to have to anchor at night, especially in a place that you haven't been to. Those are all things you want to kind of take into consideration. But communication is a big part of it as well. It really is. If you're kind of motoring up and you want to anchor somewhere and it's kind of close by some other boats and the conditions make it so that you can either get within talking distance of another boat and just say, hey, I'm thinking about anchoring over here and da da da. I don't know. It's just kind of a cordial way to go about it rather than just rock right up. You're 5 feet off the boat stern. You're dropping your anchor. I'm not offended by any means when people do that, but I'm always kind of just like, at least give me like a wave or something like that. I can remember being in the BVI one time in this lonely little anchorage called Robin Bay, and or not Robin Bay, maybe it was Long Bay. Well, anyway, and it was just me. I'm the only boat in there, and everybody else anchors all over the North Sound, but that little spot is pretty rare for anybody to be in, and just hanging out, and this bay is pretty big. It's probably a half mile, if not more, wide. And I'm tucked up in my little favorite spot with the little tiny reef right there and everything, super protected. And lo and behold, here comes a catamaran, and instead of anchoring anywhere in this whole bay, it's all wide open, nice and protected, comes right up and saddles up next to Old Sparrow. I was just like, dang, man, what the heck? Got all this room and no communication, nothing like that. And it was just kind of like, dang. And I think I ended up pulling up anchor later on that day and just moving to a different spot just so I could have my kind of peace and quiet out there. Some people will say, well, dude, you should just turn on some really loud music or walk around the boat naked. Any of these things, these very passive aggressive actions. And I don't know. I figure you can anchor anywhere, so people are allowed to do it. So if somebody comes and snuggles up right next to you and there's all this other room, if you don't want to be that close to somebody, well then yeah, pull up your anchor and move somewhere else and call it a day. At least that's what I would do. Or you can go talk to them. You can be like, hey man, you mind moving over a little bit? I have an infectious disease. That might not work though. It's kind of a tricky subject, but there really isn't a whole lot around it. One other top tip that I will always do, at least it's not so much on the subject of like a busy anchorage, but anchoring in general. I like to anchor if I'm going to be somewhere where I'll be there for a couple of days, or if I am going to be leaving the boat and going on land for the day or something like that. I typically run 2 anchors, not at like angles or anything like that. I run them in a series where I have like an old Danforth, the flat folding ones, a little triangle looking sucker. And then I have about 20 feet of Spectra, which attaches to sort of the heel of the next one, which is a Bruce or a plow anchor, I think, something like that, old school. And then that's chain all the way back up to the boat. And once I've dropped those in and then I dive them and I pull that second anchor out, oh my gosh, I have seen Sparrow yawing around in gusty 30-knot conditions, the bow just heaving one side to the next, freaking crazy. And it is not budging for the life of her. And that's a heavy boat. It's a heavy boat to have yawing around on an anchor. And I learned this from Mortissier's last book. I think it was the book that his wife put together. And yeah, he just talks about, when you put them out 45-degree angles, that can be beneficial for certain things when you're anchoring. But eventually, because if your boat yaws around, the bow gets tossed around from one side to another, so it's going to load up one, load up the other, and then eventually it's just going to pull them, and then you're going to kind of have a tangled mess. But if you have them in a series, one tied to the next, and then go into the boat, oh man, does that hold. Holy cow. I can see where it could kind of fall apart if you're on like a river with a complete 180 change in the tide, but It for me, it just gives me a peace of mind. I mean, down on the island of Dominica in Portsmouth, that was where I really kind of locked into this one, because they don't have the best holding for anchoring where I was, at least. And the winds coming off of the mountains, man, super gusty. So the boat's getting tossed all over the place, and I had just anchored. I was on the beach at the little tiki bar. Shout out to Burgess. Hopefully you're still there, buddy. And I'm looking out at Sparrow, and Sparrow's just sideways, just drifting down. Hop in the kayak and go and re-anchor it. And that was when I was like, all right, I'm putting a second one in. And then ever since then, boom, it's all good. Because a lot of times on Dominica, I'll be gone all day, up hiking in the mountains, up to the Boiling Lake or up in Marigot and all that sort of stuff, visiting friends. But yeah, it's anchoring's kind of a funny thing, It's a lot of effort sometimes, and it takes a little bit of skill. But like anything, the more you practice it, the better you get, and the more you sort of start to, get used to finding your own little spot and being able to make sure the boat's secure and do it in a very efficient fashion, because that's really the key. Is, eventually you're gonna have to pull that sucker up and move sometimes when you least want to, middle of the night and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's definitely not super fun, but the better you are and the more practiced you are, the less of a pain it really is. So thanks, Rob. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit. What is the custom immigration procedure on most islands? Yeah, essentially when you're rocking up to an island, a new island country, territorial waters, I think, start about 12, 13 miles out. And so you essentially put up your Q flag, your yellow flag, and you rock right in. Most guidebooks are going to tell you where the customs docks are. Some countries you actually tie off to a dock. Other countries you're just anchored out and you dinghy in. It all sort of depends. But typically what you don't want to do is, have, hop off of the boat and go and walk around and lollygag. You want to make that your top priority is to get in there, get checked in, and that way you're all good. And sometimes like Bermuda, they're going to call you on the radio as you approach because they got eyes on everybody coming to their island, and they'll direct you and tell you, all the information you need to know and all that. Their little customs dock's super easy. It's just not huge, so sometimes there's like a line or whatever to get onto it, but that one's super easy. Where else have I checked in at? Some of them you just pull right into the marina, and that's where the customs is, and off the boat, go check in, and you're good to go. Most of the islands make it pretty easy. Typically, if you can, my top tip would just be to search out the customs offices that are on the small islands away from the capitals, the big ones, and also where there's a lot of shipping ports and stuff. Typically they're going to be busier, and typically they're not going to be as happy and jolly to see you. Customs is not a place to joke around. Customs is not a place to make funny comments or sarcastic comments. It's yes sir, yes ma'am. Provide the information and just be as pleasant as possible, answer the questions, and just get on with it. I've only ever been on one boat that got searched completely, and that was because the captain was a complete moron and most assuredly was being jokingly funny or trying to be, and we did it in the capital, in Road Town, and lo and behold, we had boxes on the boat that were full of brochures or whatever, something like that, and he didn't know what was in them. And when they were like, "What's in those boxes?" Oh, it was just this nightmare. I was like, I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I was seeing like every single mistake you could possibly make outside of like trying to smuggle firearms or drugs into a country. Oh wow, what a trip that was! Holy smokes! But yeah, so hopefully, Rob, that sheds a little bit of life or a little informations. Any islands easier going than others? Yeah, I mean, seriously, like when you're going to the BVI, if you can check in at Joost Van Dyke, awesome. If they're open at Gun Creek, even better. But yeah, Soper's Hole and Road Town and stuff, oof, sometimes they can be a bit tough to get into. They're just not going to be as welcoming. That's all it is. And I've heard the same thing about the Bahamas too. You go off to these little outlying islands that have a little place to check in, and it's super easy. I mean, 99% of the time they're going to be fine, pleasant, all that sort of stuff. But it is, like I said, it's not a place to joke around. All right. So hopefully that, like I said, shed a little bit of light. Now, the next one I did want to get to really quick came in actually this morning from Joe. And Joe's up there in the old Gulf of Maine, up in the beautiful burg that I once haunted down east in Maine, in Rockland. And basically trying to get from Rockland across the Gulf of Maine and having to deal with all of that traffic and all that sort of stuff. And he's solo, basically trying to get down. And I'm doing this in July. Biggest thing with July is typically you're going to have to motor a lot. Gulf of Maine has a reputation. It's either not blowing at all, like ice glass, or it's actually got a little stank on it out there. There's not a whole lot of middle ground. I don't know. I've seen the Gulf of Maine in every freaking form you could believe, from, gale conditions to just absolute perfection, not a breath of wind. But I rarely ever find that it's great sailing, like that perfect 15 knot on the beam sort of condition I'm always looking for. But in any event, really the biggest thing, as you leave any of these little towns and stuff and head out, the coastal hop, the closer you are to the coastal hop, the more gear you're going to be dealing with. Not only boats, but just lots of gear. I mean, those lobster pots come way out. But if you head offshore and kind of try to cross the Gulf of Maine, headed towards the Great South Channel, which is the one I don't know. I mean, to get all the way down, where is Cape May? I gotta get my bearings here. Where is Cape May? Cape May. Let's just look it up on our device. Oh, man, I got a SIM card coming for a brick phone. I'm going back to the olden days here. It's going to be pretty cool. Cape May. But then I won't be able... Okay, Cape May, New Jersey. Oh, wow, okay. So that's a trip. Nice. That's epic. Okay. So we're going all the way down there. Ooh, nice. So... I don't know. I mean, you got 3 different routes. You can either go to the Cape Cod Canal, or you can go the Great South Channel, or you can go, I mean, it wouldn't make much sense to go north of George's Bank and then cut down. For a trip like that, and if it's really just the Gulf of Maine section, and then you're going to be offshore, if you're trying to do it in one straight hop, then Great South Channel would probably be the way to go if the weather's good. Again, there you've got some pretty heavy shipping, and you got a lot of fishing boats and stuff out there still. But typically, once you get offshore in the Gulf of Maine, 15, 20 miles out, you're not going to see much gear anymore. You'll have a few fishing vessels around, but unless you encounter the scallop fleet doing their zigzags and all that sort of stuff, all packed in all tight, it's not going to be too much of a problem. But you will have fishing boats where you can see the aura of their lights pretty much the whole night, and they'll be dotted on your AIS and everything, which does make it kind of hard to sleep, for me at least. I'm always like, because you don't know, they're always changing their course, and they're doing all this weird stuff. But, you have your AIS alarm on and all that, and you typically are just going to sleep in small bursts rather than a big, long stretch. But if you go the way of the Great South Channel, once you get south of the islands, Nantucket, and all that sort of stuff, then you're going to be pretty wide open. And depending on where the Gulf Stream eddies are and all that sort of stuff, you should be able to stay well away from that, so you don't have to deal with the threat of, countercurrents and cross currents and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, essentially... the other route would be to take the Cape Cod Canal, and then you spit you out at Narragansett or Buzzards Bay, something like that, and then you can chuck your way straight down the coast. But there's a lot of places that you can stop, obviously, to get a good night's sleep. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's one of those things when you do the solo sailing and you're doing day hops, you end up spending a huge portion of your day just going in and out of these inlets. I mean, even just to get into Cape Fear this last trip, that takes quite a few hours to get in and get to the marina. And then, you think, okay, well, I'm going to get a good night's sleep, and then I'll be out of here at 6 a.m. tomorrow with the tide. And then it's a couple hours to get out there. And then it's like noon by the time you're sailing, and then you're already like, man, we got to find our next inlet, which is why I like to just stay offshore and stay out of the traffic, or at least where the traffic is less and there's less obstacles. And yeah, essentially it's nice because then you can actually get some decent sleep while you're underway. And usually you get so tired after the first day anyway that you could sleep pretty much any time. So if you find yourself with a big gap in the traffic, it's like, all right, well, let me bunk down for an hour or something like that, and then you're good. But I always obviously have an AIS and all that sort of stuff on and functioning. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I actually even answered anything there. No, I guess I did. I mean, really, coastal cruising down the Gulf of Maine. I don't know. I just feel like there's going to be so much stuff that you're constantly having to deal with. If you're trying to make the trip quick and you're not really interested in stopping in all the lovely little burgs and ports and stuff along the way, then yeah, I'd head due south from Rockland, and once you're clear of all the stuff, have a great overnight cruising across the Gulf of Maine, head for either the Great South Channel or pull into the Cape Cod Canal, and then do your way. But it really shouldn't, depending on the boat speed and all that sort of stuff. You get a nice little either a westerly or ideally like a northwesterly. You know, if a low pressure system has passed by, you might get it a northerly. It'll be a little chilly, but in July it shouldn't be too bad. So that should be pretty good. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit. I'll shoot you an email because I know you're still working your way through the myriad of episodes from this podcast. Can't believe we're going to be hitting like 350 episodes or something pretty soon. It's crazy. Making a straight route along the coast. There's so much coastal traffic. Yes, there is. In other news, yeah, we're just plugging away. It's been a lot of fun. We're diving in. We've got our logbooks. We're trying to get nestled in and slice away a little bit of time to putting words down on the old keyboard and keep plugging away at that. We've got some interesting podcasts coming up. We've got one of the future Vendée Globe sailors. That one's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to do that one in a couple of days. I still got to put out the episode with Dabbler, with the Dobbs man himself. We had a quick little meet up down in Grand Rapids, and he's going to be coming on the Chicago to Mac with us. That'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, so we got a lot of big things, but it's nice. It's springtime. It's beautiful. Finally, when I first got up here, it was raining and cold, but now we're in the 60s. It's very temperate, very pleasant, and we get to watch the forest come alive. Right now, we got the ramps, the wild onion things, all popping out of the ground, and the trilliums will be soon to follow, and I'll keep an eye out for those lovely morels, and hopefully be able to gather up enough to make a nice little sauce or something for for a steak, or I don't know what you do with morels, really. I just like finding them. But yeah, it should be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to it. I got a couple of days off, essentially, where I'm just, puttering around, doing some fun stuff, mostly out of doors, which is wonderful this time of year. Still a lot of cleanup to be done, but then we're going to charge hard starting this coming weekend. Setting up mooring fields, getting boats in the water, all that sort of fun stuff. And then some training. Oh, it's just good to be back up in northern Michigan. The great state of northern Michigan, folks. It's a beautiful thing. Wake up in the morning to the sound of the woodpeckers. And I got a bunch of them out here right now. And the deer strolling. It's kind of like being in a Disney movie, Bambi or something like that. It's just a pleasant place. It feels real good. I'm not going to be here all summer by any means, but because we gotta travel and do a bunch of other stuff. But it is wonderful to be here now. I'm going to cherish these moments. I'm going to take it all in, and yeah, we'll keep doing updates. We'll have a couple fireside chats. If you got any topics or any other questions, feel free, sailingintoOblivion.com. You can reach out to the show. And, yeah, other than that, I'm going to do a shout-out show at some point. That was so much fun to just give people shout-outs with Rutherford. I want to do like a whole show about that sort of thing. But, yeah, it'll be pretty cool. Hopefully everybody's getting their spring cleaning underway. It's a fresh start. We got a summer coming. Holy cow, that was one heck of a throwback winter up here. I didn't get to see much of it, but I did see enough. And yeah, snow's nice in small doses. But other than that, hopefully you enjoy the show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing it out there and everything. And until next time.